On New Year's Eve, my mother did not scream. She just smiled that terrifying, controlling smile and whispered that the seat was for her real granddaughter. Before I could move, she yanked the chair, and my daughter hit the floor while 20 adults watched in silence. As I lifted my child, I realized my mother had no idea I was holding a key and a trust clause that would destroy her world, just like she had overturned that chair. My name is Riley Hughes, and at 36 years old, I thought I had finally grown immune to the bone-deep chill of Sutton Harbor, Michigan. I was wrong. The cold outside, with its 3 feet of snow packed against the asphalt, was nothing compared to the temperature inside my mother's dining room. I stood near the buffet table, holding a glass of lukewarm water, watching my daughter. Mia, she was 8 years old. She was wearing a velvet dress that she had picked out herself, a deep burgundy that matched the ribbon in her hair. She looked beautiful. She also looked terrified. Mia was sitting at the edge of the main dining table, her small hands folded neatly in her lap, exactly the way I had taught her. She was trying so hard to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible in a house that seemed designed to reject her. This was the annual New Year's Eve gathering at the Whitaker estate. It was less of a party and more of a mandatory performance review. My mother, Denise Whitaker, did not host parties. She held court. The room was filled with the low hum of polite conversation and the clinking of expensive silverware. The television in the corner was muted, showing the countdown from Times Square, a world away where people were actually happy. Here, 20 relatives sat stiffly, terrified of spilling a drop of gravy on the lace tablecloths. Denise moved through the room like a shark in a silk blouse. She was 62 but looked 50, maintained by a regimen of expensive creams and the sheer vitality one gets from controlling everyone around them. She checked the roast. She adjusted a napkin. She critiqued my aunt's weight loss with a backhanded compliment that sounded like praise until you thought about it 10 minutes later. I checked my watch. It was 11:30, 30 minutes until the ball dropped, 30 minutes until I could grab Mia, make an excuse about the roads icing over, and escape back to our small, safe duplex on the other side of town. "Relax, Riley," a voice drawled from the doorway. I didn't turn. I knew the voice. It was Brandon, my half-brother, 29 years old, handsome in a way that suggested he had never been told no in his entire life. He smelled of expensive scotch and pine. "You're late," I said, keeping my eyes on Mia. "I'm never late," Brandon laughed, stepping into the room. "I'm the event." Behind him trailed Poppy, his 6-year-old daughter, my niece. She was a sweet girl, innocent of the politics she was born into. But to my mother, Poppy wasn't just a child. She was the Messiah. She was the biological link, the continuation of the line. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. It was chemical. "Poppy!" My mother's voice rang out, sharp and bright, lacking the dull edge it always carried when she spoke to me. Denise abandoned her inspection of the centerpiece and rushed over. She scooped Poppy up, ignoring the snow on the child's boots that was now melting onto her hardwood floors, snow that Mia would have been scolded for tracking in. "Oh, look at you," Denise cooed. "Look at those eyes, the Whitaker eyes." She said it loud enough for the back of the room to hear. The Whitaker eyes, blue, like hers, like Brandon's. Mia had brown eyes, warm, intelligent, kind brown eyes. I watched Mia stiffen in her chair. She looked at me, seeking reassurance. I gave her a small, tight nod. "Just hold on," I mouthed. "Almost done." Brandon walked past me, clapping a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and patronizing. "Good to see you, Riles. You look tired." "I work for a living." "Brandon," I said. He smirked, already moving toward the bar. "Work smarter, not harder, sis." The room began to settle for the countdown toast. This was the tradition. Everyone took their assigned seats. The sparkling cider was poured for the children. The champagne was uncorked for the adults. It was a choreography my mother had perfected over decades. I moved to stand behind Mia's chair. I wanted to be close. I had a bad feeling in my gut. a primal warning that the air pressure in the room had dropped too low, too fast. "All right, everyone. Places, places," Denise announced, clapping her hands. She guided Poppy by the hand toward the head of the table. There was only one empty seat left at the children's end of the table. It was the seat Mia was currently occupying. The room went quiet. The chatter died down. The only sound was the wind rattling the window panes and the low murmur of the TV announcer. Denise stopped. She looked at the table. She looked at Poppy. Then she looked at Mia. Mia smiled tentatively. "Hi, Grandma Denise. Happy New Year." My mother did not smile back. Her face was a mask of pleasant confusion, the kind that is far more dangerous than anger. "Oh, sweetie," Denise said. Her voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the silent room. "You're in the wrong spot." Mia blinked. "I just sat where the card said." She pointed to the place card. It clearly read Mia. Denise reached out and plucked the card from the table. She crumpled it in her hand, a swift, violent motion that was over in a second. "That was a mistake," Denise said. She turned to the room, addressing the 20 adults watching. "We need the head of the kids' table for the toast, for the photo." I stepped forward. "Mom, there are plenty of chairs. Just pull up another one." Denise ignored me. She didn't even look at me. Her focus was entirely on my daughter. "Poppy needs to sit here," Denise said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steel. "This seat is for the granddaughter." "I'm a granddaughter," Mia whispered. It was barely audible, but in the silence, it sounded like a shout. Denise leaned down. Her face was inches from Mia's. She was smiling, but her eyes were dead. "This seat," Denise said, enunciating every word, "is for the real granddaughter, the one with the blood, the one who belongs." My heart stopped. I saw the tears well up in Mia's eyes instantly. "Mom, stop," I said, my voice shaking. I reached for Mia. "Get up, child," Denise snapped. I said stop. I lunged forward, but I was too slow. "You out," Denise commanded. And then, she did the unthinkable. She didn't wait for Mia to slide off. She didn't wait for me to grab her. Denise grabbed the back of the heavy oak chair and yanked it backward with a shocking amount of strength. It wasn't a slide. It was a violent jerk. Mia lost her balance. Her small hands grasped at the tablecloth. But there was nothing to hold on to. Crash! Mia hit the hardwood floor hard. She landed on her side, a small, fragile heap of velvet and limbs. The glass of sparkling cider she had been guarding so carefully tipped over, splashing across the pristine white tablecloth and dripping down onto her dress like a dark, sticky wound. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. The image burned itself into my retinas. My mother, standing tall, holding the empty chair like a trophy. My daughter, curled on the floor, too shocked to even cry yet. The cider dripping. Drip, drip, drip. I froze, waiting. I was waiting for the outrage. I was waiting for my aunt, who volunteered at the church, to gasp. I was waiting for my uncle, the high school principal, to stand up and shout. I was waiting for Brandon, the father of a daughter himself, to say, "Jesus, Mom, that's too much." I looked around the room. 20 people. 20 adults who claimed to be family. My aunt looked down at her plate. My uncle took a sip of his drink. A cousin pretended to check a text message. And Brandon, I looked at my brother. He was leaning against the mantel, glass in hand. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't horrified. He was watching the scene with a faint, bored amusement. The corner of his mouth quirked up in a smirk that said, "Well, that's the rules." They were all complicit. Every single one of them. They were terrified of Denise, or they were on her payroll, or they simply didn't care because Mia wasn't blood. The silence was louder than any scream. Mia let out a small, choked sob. That sound broke my paralysis. I dropped to my knees beside her. Mia, honey, look at me." I checked her arms, her head. She was shaking, her face pale, her eyes wide with humiliation and pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I spilled the juice. I'm sorry. Mommy? No, I said, my voice trembling with a rage so pure it felt like lava in my throat. No, you do not apologize. I scooped her up into my arms. She was too big to be carried, really. But in that moment, she felt weightless. I stood up. I turned to face my mother. Denise was calmly positioning the chair back at the table. She patted the seat cushion. Come sit, Poppy. Grandma has a special treat for you. She acted as if she had just swatted a fly, not assaulted a child. You're sick, I said. It came out low, guttural. Denise turned to me, her expression mild, almost bored. Oh, Riley, don't be dramatic. She slipped. She's clumsy. Just like, she waved her hand vaguely. Well, we don't know who she's like, do we? The cruelty was breathtaking. She didn't slip, I said. You pulled the chair. I was making room for family, Denise said. If you're going to make a scene, Riley, you can leave. We have a toast to do, a family toast. She emphasized the word family like a weapon. I looked at Brandon again. You're going to let her do this? Brandon shrugged. It's Mom's house, Riley. Mom's rules. Besides, the kid is fine. Don't ruin the night. I looked at them. The warmth of the room felt suffocating now. The smell of the roast beef made me nauseous. I realized then that I wasn't looking at a family. I was looking at a cult of money, bloodlines, and obedience. We're leaving, I said. Good, Denise said, turning her back to me to pour champagne for Poppy. Take the side door. I don't want the neighbors seeing you carrying on. I walked out. I didn't take the side door. I walked right through the front hallway, past the portrait of my grandfather, Walter Whitaker, that hung in the foyer. His eyes seemed to follow me. He looked stern in the painting, but I remembered him differently. I remembered sawdust and peppermint candy. I kicked the front door open, letting a blast of 0-degree air swirl into the heated house. I didn't close it behind me. The drive home was a blur of black ice and streetlights. My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. In the back seat, Mia was silent. When we got to our duplex, I carried her inside. The house was cold. I had turned the heat down to save money while we were out. I cranked the thermostat up and brought Mia into the bathroom. I sat her on the closed toilet lid. The cider had dried sticky on her arm, and there was a nasty red scrape on her elbow where she had hit the floorboards. I wet a washcloth with warm water. This might sting a little, baby. I wiped the scrape gently. Mia didn't flinch. She was staring at the bath mat, her expression vacant. Why did she do that? Mia asked softly. Because she's a mean, unhappy woman, I said, dabbing at the cut. It has nothing to do with you, Mia. Nothing. Mia looked up at me. Her brown eyes were swimming with tears again. She said the seat was for the real granddaughter. I froze. Am I? Mia's voice cracked. Am I not a real granddaughter? The question hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It was the question I had feared since the day the adoption papers were stamped. It was the crack in the foundation of her identity. And Denise had just taken a sledgehammer to it. I dropped the washcloth. I took Mia's face in my hands. Listen to me, I said fiercely. You are my daughter. You are real. You are the most real thing in this world. Grandma Denise is confused. She is wrong. Do you hear me? She is wrong. Mia nodded. But I could see she didn't believe me. Not fully. The seed had been planted. Denise had done the damage she intended. She hadn't just bruised Mia's elbow. She had tried to invalidate her existence. I put Mia to bed. I read to her until her breathing evened out, until the exhaustion took over. I walked out of her room and closed the door softly. I stood in the hallway of my small, rented house. It was silent, and then the rage came back. But it wasn't the hot, shaking rage from the dining room. It was cold. It was calm. It was clarifying. I walked into my bedroom. I didn't turn on the light. The street lamp outside cast long, jagged shadows across the floor. I went to the old oak dresser in the corner. It was the only piece of furniture I had from my childhood, a piece my grandfather Walter, had made with his own hands. I remembered the day he died. 5 years ago, I was the only one holding his hand. Denise was out in the hall, arguing with the hospice nurse about billing. Brandon was nowhere to be found. Grandpa Walter had pulled me close. His grip was weak, his hands rough from 60 years of woodworking. "Riley," he had wheezed, "they think I'm just a simple carpenter. They think I didn't see what they were doing to the books, to the family." "Rest, Grandpa," I had said. "No," he had insisted. "Listen, if anyone touches what is yours, if they try to take from you, you must know how to read the paperwork. The devil is in the details, girl, and the salvation is in the clauses." I hadn't fully understood him then. I thought he was delirious. But tonight, as the image of my daughter falling to the floor played on a loop in my mind, his words echoed with terrifying clarity. If anyone touches what is yours, Denise had touched what was mine. She had hurt my child. She had declared war. I opened the bottom drawer of the dresser, underneath a stack of old winter sweaters. My hand found the false bottom. I pried it open. There it was, a small, heavy metal box, and taped to the top of it, a thick, cream-colored envelope. I picked up the envelope. The handwriting was shaky but bold, written in the carpenter's pencil my grandfather always favored. For Riley. Don't wait. I reached into the hidden compartment again and felt the cold steel of a key. My mother thought the power in this family came from her shouting, from her manipulation, from her ability to humiliate an 8-year-old girl at a dinner table. She thought she held all the cards because she held the checkbook. She didn't know about the box. She didn't know that for 5 years. I had honored my grandfather's wish to keep the peace. I had kept the box closed. I had tried to be the good daughter, but the peace was over. I inserted the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying, heavy click. The lid sprang open. To understand why a 62-year-old woman would pull a chair out from under an 8-year-old girl, you have to understand the kingdom of dust. That was what I called Harbor Light Crafted Company when I was growing up. It was my grandfather's legacy, a sprawling workshop on the edge of Sutton Harbor, where raw timber was turned into furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Walter Whitaker, my grandfather, built Harbor Light with a singular obsession. He loved the wood. He respected the grain. He could run his hand over a piece of white oak and tell you where the tree had stood and how much rain it had seen in 1992. But when Walter died, the sawdust was swept away, and the kingdom of dust became the kingdom of ledgers. My mother, Denise, did not love wood. She loved what the wood bought. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, the metal box open in front of me, but my mind was drifting back 10 years, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I became the enemy. It wasn't one big explosion. It was a slow erosion, like water wearing down stone. In the Whitaker household, there were 2 roles cast before we were even born. Brandon was the heir. I was the spare. But not just a spare. I was the defective spare because I had the audacity to have opinions. I remembered the summer I turned 16. I wanted to work at the shop. I wanted to learn how to sand, how to stain, how to feel the life in the timber like Grandpa did. I asked Denise for a job. She had looked at me over the rim of her reading glasses, seated at the mahogany desk that used to be Walter's, but now held her dual-monitor computer setup. "We don't have a budget for unskilled labor, Riley," she had said, not looking up from her spreadsheets. "If you want money, the diner on Main Street is hiring dishwashers." 2 weeks later, Brandon, who was 14 and had never lifted anything heavier than a lacrosse stick, was given a title, Junior Inventory Associate. He was paid $18 an hour to sit in the air-conditioned back office and play games on his phone. That was the rule. Brandon was an investment. I was an expense. When it came time for college, the rule became a law. Brandon was sent to a private university on the East Coast, tuition fully covered by the Family Education Trust. He drove a brand-new SUV that the company leased for logistical purposes. I went to the state university 40 minutes away. I drove a 10-year-old sedan that rattled when I went over 50 miles per hour. When I asked about the education trust, Denise told me that the market was down. that liquidity was tight, and that taking out student loans would teach me fiscal responsibility. I learned responsibility. All right, I worked double shifts waiting tables while studying supply chain management. I learned the value of $1 because I never saw one I hadn't bled for. Brandon learned that if he overdrafted his account, a magical wire transfer would appear the next morning. But the real fracture, the one that could never be healed, happened 5 years ago. It wasn't about money, it was about Mia. I had married young, a rebellious mistake in my mother's eyes, and divorced young, which was a vindication in her eyes. I was 29, living alone, when my best friend Sarah died. Sarah had been a single mother, and in her final days, she asked me to take care of her 3-year-old daughter. There was no hesitation. I took Mia in. I fought through the family court system. I dealt with the social workers, and I finalized the adoption. I became a mother not by biology, but by a promise. When I brought Mia to her first Sunday dinner at the estate, I expected some coolness. I did not expect the wall of ice. Denise had looked at the toddler holding my hand this small, terrified child who had just lost her mother, and she didn't offer a hug. She didn't offer a cookie. "She doesn't look like us," Denise had said. That was her first sentence. "She's my daughter, Mom," I had replied, tightening my grip on Mia's hand. "She is the child of a stranger," Denise corrected me, pouring tea with steady hands. "It is a noble thing you are doing, Riley. Charity is very admirable, but let's not pretend she is family. Family is blood. Family is the line." From that day on, the distinction was enforced with surgical precision. At Christmas, Brandon's future children were discussed as heirs. Mia was discussed as a responsibility when Brandon married Kara. Denise gifted them a down payment on a house. When I adopted Mia, Denise sent me a book on handling traumatized children. She was careful, though, in public, at the grocery store or the annual town fundraiser. Denise was the doting grandmother. She would pat Mia on the head and tell the neighbors, "Oh, Riley has such a big heart, taking in this poor little orphan." She spun the narrative so she looked like the saint supporting her daughter's charitable project. But inside the house, the walls had ears and the ledger had rules. I specifically remembered a Tuesday afternoon 3 years ago. I had gone to the estate to confront Denise about the trust fund. Grandpa Walter had set up the Whitaker Family Trust decades ago. I knew, vaguely, that it was supposed to cover education and medical needs for all his descendants. I found Denise in the sunroom, reviewing the quarterly earnings for Harbor Light. "I want to see the trust documents," I had said, standing my ground. "Mia is my legal child. Under the law, she is a descendant. I want to set up her college draw." Denise didn't even blink. She slowly took off her glasses and cleaned them with a silk cloth. "The trust is a complex financial instrument, Riley," she said, her voice dropping to that patronizing tone she reserved for me. "It's not a piggy bank. I manage it to ensure the capital survives for the future, for the real legacy." "Is Mia not part of the legacy?" I asked. "Mia is an addition," Denise said. "A sweet addition. But the trust was written by your grandfather for his blood. I am simply the executor. I have to follow his spirit, even if the legal language is flexible." "Show me the papers," I demanded. "If the language covers legal adoption, you have to pay out." "I keep the papers with the lawyers to keep things from getting messy," she said, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "You don't understand high-level finance, Riley. You manage warehouse inventory. Leave the wealth management to the adults. I'm protecting you from your own confusion." She was wrong about one thing. I didn't just manage warehouse inventory. For the last 7 years, I had worked as a cost controller for a major logistics firm. My entire job was looking at spreadsheets and finding the lies. I spent 40 hours a week tracking shipping containers, fuel surcharges, and vendor contracts. I knew exactly how companies siphoned money. I knew that consulting fees were often code for bribes or nepotism. I knew that miscellaneous maintenance was where people hid their personal renovations. I knew how to follow the money because I knew how people tried to hide it. And I knew my mother. Denise was a control freak, but she was also arrogant. She assumed that because I drove a used car and bought clothes at Target, I was stupid. She assumed that because Brandon had the fancy degree, he was the smart one, but Brandon was lazy, and Denise was comfortable, sitting on my bedroom floor. I ran my thumb over the edge of the yellowed envelope I had taken from the box. The smell of old paper and metallic shavings hit me. I closed my eyes and saw my grandfather again. It was the week before he died. He was lucid for only an hour a day. He had grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong for a dying man. "Denise, she likes the shiny things," he had whispered. "She forgets that the varnish is just the top layer. The strength is in the joinery. Riley, do you know what a springing trustee is?" I had shook my head. "No, Grandpa." "It means if the carpenter gets drunk and starts swinging the hammer at the walls," he wheezed, a faint smile on his lips. "Someone else takes the hammer away. I put it in there. I put it in the claws, because I know her. She thinks she owns the wood. She only owns the varnish. This trust," he had said, looking me dead in the eye, "cannot be broken, but it can be moved. If you see the rot, Riley, you cut it out." I hadn't wanted to believe him then. I wanted to believe that my mother, for all her faults, loved us. I wanted to believe that the friction between us was just a personality clash, a mother-daughter thing that would soften with time. But the image of the chair being yanked back replayed in my mind. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a slip of judgment. Denise pulling that chair out from under Mia was the physical manifestation of what she had been doing to us financially and emotionally for years. She had decided that Mia didn't have a seat at the table. She had decided that I didn't have a voice in the room. She thought she was teaching us a lesson about hierarchy. She thought that by humiliating Mia in front of the family, she was cementing the social order blood at the head of the table, charity cases on the floor. She thought I would do what I always did, swallow the anger, clean up the mess, and go home to cry in private. She didn't know I had the key. I looked down at the papers in the box. There was a thick document bound in blue paper, the Whitaker Irrevocable Family Trust, and underneath it, a stack of bank statements that my grandfather must have been hoarding in secret before he passed. And there was something else, a small, black notebook. I opened the notebook. It was in Walter's handwriting. It wasn't a diary. It was a list of checks he hadn't signed, a list of vendors he didn't recognize. July 2015, $5,000 to Klein Ridge Consulting. Who is Klein? September 2015, $12,000 for office renovation. My office hasn't been painted in 20 years. My heart hammered against my ribs. Klein, that was the last name of Denise's second husband, a man she had been briefly married to in the 90s before he vanished to Florida, Brandon's father. I realized then that this wasn't just about favoritism. It wasn't just about being mean to Mia. This was about theft. Denise wasn't just protecting the legacy from Mia. She was protecting a crime scene. She needed us to be intimidated. She needed us to be confused by the paperwork. Because if we actually looked, we would see that the kingdom of dust was being looted from the inside out. I took a deep breath. The air in my bedroom was cold, but I felt hot. "Okay, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to talk about rules? You want to talk about who really belongs?" I picked up the blue-bound document. I didn't need a lawyer to understand the first page. I needed my eyes, my brain, and the rage that was currently keeping me awake at 3 a.m. I turned the page. The battle hadn't started when Mia hit the floor. That was just the declaration of war. The battle was starting now, under the light of a 60-watt bulb, with a stack of papers that smelled like justice. I was going to read every single line. I was going to find every single dollar. And I was going to prove that while Denise might have written the social rules of this family, Walter Whitaker had written the legal ones, and his rules were about to break her. The morning after New Year's Day, Sutton Harbor was a ghost town buried under gray slush. The world felt frozen, suspended in that strange, silent hangover that follows the holidays. But my mind was running at 100 miles an hour. I stood in the lobby of First National Bank at 9 o'clock sharp. The moment the doors unlocked, I was wearing my thickest coat, but I felt naked. In my purse, I had the death certificate for Walter Whitaker, my own birth certificate, and the small, heavy silver key I had taken from the false bottom of the dresser. The bank manager was a man named Mr. Henderson, who had known my grandfather. He looked at my paperwork, then at the key, and gave a solemn nod. He didn't ask why it had taken me 5 years to come. He didn't ask why my mother wasn't with me. He just led me into the vault. The air inside was cool and smelled of dust and old currency. When the long metal box slid out of slot 402, it felt heavier than it looked. Mr. Henderson left me alone in a small private room with a table and a lamp. I sat down and stared at the metal lid. This was Pandora's box. Once I opened it, I knew there was no going back to the way things were. I thought of Mia's face when she hit the floor. I thought of the way Brandon had smirked. I opened the box. There was no cash. There were no diamonds. It was exactly what Grandpa had promised, paper and data. Sitting on top was a thick envelope labeled Trust Agreement. Original. Beneath that was a silver USB drive, the kind that looked bulky by today's standards, and a small stack of index cards held together by a rubber band. The rubber band had dried out and snapped as soon as I touched it. I picked up the index cards first. They were written in pencil. Klein Ridge Consulting, Lakeside A and D, Whitaker Klein Holdings. I didn't recognize these names. Harborlight Crafted Comoys had vendors. Sure lumber yards, varnish suppliers, logistics partners. But these sounded like shell companies. They sounded like the kind of generic names you pull out of a hat when you need to print an invoice for nothing. I put everything into my bag. I didn't want to read it here. I needed my laptop. I needed my spreadsheets. I drove home, my eyes checking the rearview mirror every few blocks. It was paranoia. I knew that. Denise didn't know I had the key. She thought she was the only one who held the strings. But the feeling of being watched made the skin on the back of my neck prickle. Back at the duplex, Mia was still asleep. I set up my workspace at the kitchen table. I brewed a pot of coffee, black, and cracked my knuckles. I wasn't Riley the daughter anymore. I wasn't Riley the black sheep. I was Riley Hughes, logistics cost controller. I was about to audit my own family. I started with the paper document, the Whitaker Irrevocable Family Trust. Denise had always told me the trust was discretionary, meaning she could decide who got what based on her mood. She had told me the language was strict about bloodline. I flipped to the definitions section. My finger traced the legal jargon until I found Article 3 beneficiaries. The term issue and descendants shall refer to the lineal descendants of the grantor. Walter Whitaker, of the first degree and subsequent degrees. I held my breath, and then, there it was, the sentence that changed everything. For the purposes of this instrument, any individual legally adopted by a descendant of the grantor prior to said individual attaining the age of 18 shall be considered a lineal descendant with full rights and privileges equal to those of biological issue. I read it 3 times. Equal to those of biological issue. Denise had lied. She hadn't just misinterpreted it. She had looked me in the eye for 5 years and flat out lied. Mia wasn't a charity case. According to Walter Whitaker, Mia had the same claim to this money as Poppy. I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek, but I wiped it away angrily. No crying? Not yet. I kept reading. I needed to find the weapon Grandpa had told me about. The springing trustee. It was buried on page 42, under removal and replacement of trustee. Clause 7b. The springing trustee provision. In the event that the serving trustee is found to have engaged in gross negligence, malfeasance, or the commingling of trust assets with personal assets, the position of trustee shall immediately spring to the primary adult beneficiary next in line, bypassing any other appointed successors. Primary adult beneficiary, Riley Whitaker, Hughes. I sat back in my chair. The room was silent. But my head was roaring. Grandpa had known. He had anticipated that Denise might get greedy, and he had built a trapdoor. If I could prove malfeasance, wrongdoing, I wouldn't just get a payout. I would become the boss. I would control the trust. I would control the shares of the company held by the trust. I would control Denise. But I needed proof. Accusations weren't enough. I needed numbers. I plugged the silver USB drive into my laptop. It hummed to life. The files were organized by year, ending 5 years ago, right before Grandpa died. But inside the folders, there were scanned bank statements and emails he had archived. It seemed he had been quietly building a case against his own daughter during his final months. I opened a spreadsheet and started typing. I needed to build a timeline. I looked at the bank statements from the trust account. January 15, 2016. Transfer out $4,500. Recipient Klein Ridge Consulting LLC. February 15, 2016. Transfer out $4,500. Recipient Klein Ridge Consulting LLC. It was a monthly bleed. I opened a new tab on my browser and searched the state business registry for Klein Ridge Consulting. No website, no LinkedIn profile. The registered agent address was a P.O. box in a town 3 hours away, but the name Klein. That was the smoking gun. Denise's second husband, Brandon's father, was named Richard Klein. She was funneling trust money meant for education and health care into a shell company that likely funneled right back to her or her ex-husband. But that was just the appetizer. I found a folder on the USB named Suspicious Activity. Grandpa hadn't been subtle. Inside, there were scanned invoices from the main business account. One invoice was from a company called Lakeside A&D. It was billed for warehouse structural consultation. The amount was $22,000. I frowned. I knew the warehouse. We hadn't had structural work done in a decade. I cross-referenced the date of the invoice, June 2017. Then I opened the folder marked Holiday Expenses. This wasn't a business folder. This looked like a folder where someone had accidentally backed up their personal phone photos or receipts. Grandpa must have snagged it from the shared server before he lost access. I clicked on a file named June Reno, JPG. It was a photo of Denise's kitchen. I recognized the granite countertops. They were new. I remembered when she got them installed. She had told everyone she paid for it with savings. I zoomed in on the receipt sitting on the counter in the photo. It was from a high-end design firm. The date matched the Lakeside A&D invoice perfectly. The amount matched perfectly. She hadn't paid for a structural consultation. She had paid for her kitchen remodel and billed it to the company as a business expense. That was tax fraud. That was embezzlement. That was commingling of assets. I felt a cold thrill run down my spine. This was it. This was the key to the trap door. I spent the next 4 hours digging. I didn't eat. I didn't drink the coffee as it turned cold. I was a machine. I found a trip to Italy listed as European Market Research. I found a luxury SUV lease listed as Fleet Vehicle Unit 4. I found tuition payments for Brandon's master's degree, which he never finished, listed as Executive Training Seminars. I took screenshots of everything. I created a master file. I highlighted the dates, the amounts, and the lies. I annotated it with the precise language from the trust agreement: violation of Clause 4, violation of fiduciary duty, evidence of theft. By the time I was done, it was 4 a.m. The house was pitch black except for the glow of my monitor. My eyes burned, but my hands were steady. I had enough to bury her, not just socially, but legally. I had enough to send her to prison if I wanted to go that far. But right now, I just wanted the trust. I wanted safety for Mia. I opened my email client. I searched for the name I had seen on the original trust document: Malcolm Greer, attorney at law. He was still practicing. His firm was in Detroit. He had a reputation for being a shark who ate other sharks. I composed a new email. Subject urgent. Breach of fiduciary duty. Walter Whitaker. Trust. Dear Mr. Greer, my name is Riley Hughes. I am the granddaughter of Walter Whitaker. I am in possession of the original trust agreement and evidence of systemic embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty by the current trustee, Denise Whitaker. Attached is a forensic summary of unauthorized transfers to shell entities, including Klein Ridge Consulting, as well as proof of personal expenses charged to the trust corpus. Pursuant to Clause 7b, I believe the conditions for the springing trustee provision have been met. I am requesting an immediate review and a freeze on all trust assets. I am ready to proceed. Sincerely, Riley Hughes. I hovered my mouse over the send button. I knew what this meant. This wasn't just a legal maneuver. This was lighting a match and throwing it into a room full of gasoline. Once I sent this, there would be no more Sunday dinners. There would be no more pretending. Denise would come for me with everything she had. I looked at the closed door of Mia's bedroom. I remembered her asking, "Am I not a real granddaughter?" I pressed send. The screen refreshed. Message sent. I sat back. Exhaling a breath I felt like I had been holding for 20 years. It was done. I closed the laptop and walked to the window. The sky was just beginning to turn a bruised purple. The first hint of dawn. The snow on the street looked almost blue. I decided to try to get an hour of sleep before Mia woke up. I needed to be rested for the war. I laid down on the couch, pulling a blanket over me. I closed my eyes. I drifted off for what felt like 5 minutes. And then, the phone rang. It was a jarring, shrill sound in the quiet house. I jolted awake, my heart hammering. I looked at the clock. It was 6:15 in the morning. Who would call at 6:15, Mr. Greer wouldn't be in the office yet. I picked up my cell phone. The screen was bright in the dim room. The caller ID read Mom. My stomach dropped. I hadn't CC'd her on the email. I hadn't told a soul. Mr. Greer's office hadn't even opened yet. How did she know? I stared at the phone as it vibrated in my hand, buzzing like an angry insect. She knew. She always knew. I realized then that my investigation might have been thorough, but my security had been naive. The family email server, the shared cloud accounts from years ago that I never disconnected, or maybe she had alerts set up on her own name with the law firm. I didn't answer. I let it ring. But as the ringing stopped, a text message appeared on the screen. "We need to talk. Now. Don't make me come over there with the police." The cold from the window seemed to seep right into my bones. The safe was open. The truth was out, and the monster was awake. The banging on my front door didn't sound like a knock. It sounded like a raid. It was barely 7 o'clock in the morning. The winter sun was just beginning to bleed a pale, watery light through the curtains, but the noise vibrating through the wood frame of my house was violent enough to wake the dead. I glanced frantically toward the hallway, praying Mia was still in a deep sleep. After the trauma of last night, she needed the rest. If she woke up and saw her grandmother now, I didn't know if she would scream or hide under the bed. I shoved the laptop into my tote bag and slid it under the couch. I patted my pocket to make sure my phone was there. Then, I unlocked the deadbolt. I didn't even get the chance to turn the handle fully. The door was pushed open from the outside with aggressive force, nearly clipping my shoulder. Denise Whitaker swept into my small living room like a blast of Arctic wind. She was wearing a camel hair coat that probably cost more than my car, and her hair was perfectly coiffed, sprayed into a helmet of gold that defied the morning humidity. Brandon followed her, closing the door and leaning against it. He looked less put together. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was wearing a hoodie under a leather jacket, looking like a college kid who had been up all night partying, or in this case, panicking. "Where is it?" Denise demanded. "No, hello, no good morning, and certainly no. I'm sorry I assaulted your child 12 hours ago." I crossed my arms, leaning back against the wall to put some distance between us. "Good morning to you too, Mother. To what do I owe the pleasure of a home invasion?" "Don't play cute with me, Riley," Denise snapped, pulling her leather gloves off finger by finger. The sound of the leather stretching was sharp in the quiet room. "You sent an email to Malcolm Greer. I want to know what you sent, and I want to know where you got the files." "I sent what was necessary," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "And I got them from the source you thought you buried." Brandon let out a scoff, pushing off the door. "See, I told you she was going to be dramatic about this. Riley, you're making a fool of yourself. You're harassing the family lawyers with unauthorized documents." "Unauthorized?" I looked at him. "They are grandfather's documents. I am a beneficiary. The only thing unauthorized here is the creative accounting you two have been doing with the trust corpus." Denise stepped closer. Her perfume Chanel and cold ambition filled my nose. You have no right to possess those papers. That safe deposit box was company property. If you took anything from it, that is theft, corporate espionage. It was a personal box, I corrected her. In Walter Whitaker's name, and since I have the key legally passed down to me, it's not theft. It's discovery. You think you're so smart, Denise hissed, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You think because you check invoices for a trucking company you understand high-level estate planning. You don't know what you're looking at. You are looking at tax strategies. Riley, complex strategies. Is paying for your kitchen renovation a tax strategy? I asked. Is funneling $5,000 a month to a shell company in your ex-husband's name a strategy? Because to the IRS, that's usually called fraud. The color drained from Brandon's face. He looked at Denise, nervous. I told you, Brandon muttered to her. I told you the Klein invoices were too sloppy. Shut up, Brandon, Denise commanded without looking at him. She kept her eyes locked on mine. You are trying to destroy this family. Riley, just like you always do. You can't stand that you don't fit in. So you want to burn the house down. I'm not the one who pushed a child onto the floor, I said, my voice rising slightly. The memory of Mia falling flashed in my mind, fueling my adrenaline. You want to talk about destroying family. You humiliated my daughter. You hurt her. And now you come into my house and talk about tax strategies. That was an accident. Denise waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a gnat. The girl is clumsy. And don't change the subject. We are here to fix this mess before you embarrass us publicly. I'm not changing the subject, I said. It's the same subject. You don't respect Mia, so you don't respect her rights to the trust. You think you can steal from her because she doesn't matter to you. I slipped my hand into my pocket. My thumb found the volume button and the side key. I knew the shortcut. Click, click. My phone vibrated once against my hip. The voice recorder was running. If the books are clean, I said, speaking clearly for the microphone, then you have nothing to worry about. Denise, an audit will prove you right. Why are you so afraid of Malcolm Greer seeing the statements? Denise let out a sharp, frustrated sigh. She walked over to my kitchen table and pulled out a chair, sitting down as if she owned the place. Riley, sit down, she ordered. I'll stand. Fine. Be stubborn. She smoothed the tablecloth. Look, the trust had to be adjusted. Your grandfather, bless his heart, he was old. He didn't understand the modern economy. He didn't understand that to keep the business alive, we needed liquidity. We had to move capital around to protect the legacy. Move to where I pressed. To your bank account. To the family, she said, emphasizing the word. To the people who are actually carrying the Whitaker name forward. Brandon has a child, a biological child. Poppy is the future. We had to ensure the resources were concentrated where they would do the most good. We adjusted the flow to suit the needs of the new family structure. I felt a chill go through me. She had just admitted it. She admitted diverting funds based on biology. So you admit it, I said. You cut Mia out. You used the trust money to subsidize Brandon and Poppy because you don't consider Mia real family. It's not about feelings, Riley. It's about blood. Denise slammed her hand on the table. The trust was built on Whitaker sweat. It stays with Whitaker blood. That is the unwritten law of this family, regardless of what some liberal lawyer wrote on a piece of paper 30 years ago. But the paper is legal, I said. The unwritten law isn't... Brandon stepped forward. He tried to soften his tone, putting on the good cop face. Rye, listen, we're not saying Mia gets nothing. We're just saying the main trust is complicated. Mom and I were talking on the way over. We want to help. Help how? I asked, skeptical. We can set up a separate account for Mia, Brandon said, pulling a folded checkbook from his jacket pocket. A scholarship fund, completely separate from the Whitaker Trust. We can write a check today, $20,000, for her private school, or dance lessons, or whatever she needs. I looked at the checkbook, then I looked at Denise. She was watching me closely, her eyes predatory. 20,000, I repeated. And what do I have to do for this generosity? You recall the email, Denise said instantly. You sent a follow-up to Greer saying it was a mistake, that you were emotional and confused. You return the USB drive to me, and you sign a document stating you have no further claims against the estate management. It was a bribe, a cheap, insulting bribe. They were trying to buy my daughter's inheritance, which was likely worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions, for the price of a used Honda. You want me to sell my daughter's rights for 20 grand? I let out a dry laugh. You really do think I'm stupid. It's 20,000 more than she has now, Denise said coldly, and it's 20,000 more than you'll get if you fight us. Because if you fight us, Riley, we will bleed you dry. We have the lawyers on retainer. You have a legal Zoom account. I have the truth, I said. The truth is expensive, Brandon countered, and dangerous. You don't know what you're opening up. Riley, the tax guys, we have specialists handling the reporting. If you start poking holes, you're going to trigger audits that go back 10 years. You're going to put the whole factory at risk. Do you want 300 employees to lose their jobs because you're jealous? I'm not jealous, I said. I'm the springing trustee. The room went dead silent. Denise stood up slowly. Her face was no longer red with anger. It was pale with hatred. You read that clause? She whispered. I read everything. You think you can take my company? Denise walked toward me until she was inches from my face. I built that business after your father ran off. I kept it alive when Walter went senile. It is mine. It belongs to the trust, I said, holding my ground. And the trust belongs to the beneficiaries, all of them. Denise stared at me for a long moment. Then, a terrifying calmness settled over her features. She reached into her purse. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, she said. I wanted to handle this like family, but you are clearly not family anymore. She pulled out a thick white envelope. It wasn't a check. It was a legal packet. She shoved it against my chest. I grabbed it reflexively. What is this? Consider yourself served, Denise said. We knew you might be difficult. Our lawyers drafted this up last night while you were playing detective. I looked down at the cover page. The bold text jumped out at me. Civil lawsuit for damages. Plaintiff Harborlight. Crafted Coa. Denise Whitaker. Defendant. Riley Hughes. I flipped the page. My eyes scanned the legal jargon. Count 1, defamation of character. Count 2. Tortious interference with business relations. Count 3. Misappropriation of trade secrets. We are suing you for $1.5 million in damages, Denise said, her voice smooth as silk. For stealing confidential company data and attempting to sabotage our credit standing with the bank. If you persist with this email to Greer, we will add extortion to the list. You're suing me. I stared at her, incredulous. For finding out you're stealing. We're suing you for spreading lies, Brandon said, though he looked at the floor when he said it. Mom says if you drop it, the lawsuit goes away. This is intimidation, I said. This is the real world, Denise corrected. You want to play legal games? Welcome to the big leagues. She buttoned her coat. You have 24 hours to retract that email and sign the settlement. What settlement? The last page, Denise said, nodding at the packet in my hand. She turned and walked to the door. Brandon lingered for a second, looking at me with something that might have been pity, or maybe just guilt. Just take the 20 grand, Riley, he whispered. She's not going to stop. Then he followed his mother out into the snow. I slammed the door and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the papers. I slid down against the door, sitting on the cold floor of the entryway. I checked my phone. The recording was saved. 12 minutes of confession. 12 minutes of them admitting they adjusted the trust and offered me money to shut up. But then I looked at the papers in my lap. A lawsuit. $1.5 million. I didn't have that kind of money. I didn't have $5,000, let alone $1 million. They knew that. They were trying to bury me in legal fees before I could even start. I turned to the last page of the packet. The document Denise had called the settlement. It was titled Family Resolution and Non-Disclosure Agreement. I skimmed the paragraphs. It demanded I destroy all copies of the trust documents. It demanded I resign from any claim to the estate. It demanded I never speak about the company's finances to a third party. But it was the final clause, right above the signature line, that made my blood run cold and then boil hot. Clause 14. Acknowledgement of status. The undersigned, Riley Hughes, hereby acknowledges and agrees that the minor child, Mia Hughes, is not considered a qualified beneficiary under the definition of the Family Tradition Protocol, and knowingly waives any and all future claims of inheritance, support, or association with the Whitaker lineage on said child's behalf. They didn't just want the money. They wanted me to sign a piece of paper declaring that my daughter didn't belong. They wanted me to legally agree that she was an outsider. I stared at the words until they blurred. Mia Hughes is not considered a qualified beneficiary. I heard a small creak from the hallway. I looked up. Mia was standing there in her flannel pajamas, holding her stuffed bear. She was rubbing her eyes. "Mommy," she asked, her voice thick with sleep. Who was yelling? Was it Grandma? I quickly flipped the legal packet over, hiding the hateful words face down on the floor. I forced a smile onto my face, even though I felt like I was going to throw up. "It was just the TV, baby," I lied. "Just a loud show." Mia looked at the door, then at me. She didn't look convinced. "Is Grandma mad at me?" she asked. I stood up, leaving the lawsuit on the floor. I walked over and hugged her, burying my face in her hair. "No," I whispered. "She's mad at me, and she's going to be a lot madder soon." Because as I held my daughter, I knew one thing for certain. I would live in a cardboard box before I signed that paper. They had brought a lawsuit to my door. Fine, I was going to bring the apocalypse to theirs. The town of Sutton Harbor didn't need a courtroom to pass a verdict. It just needed an internet connection and 24 hours. By the time I woke up on the second day after New Year's, the silence in my phone had been replaced by a different kind of noise. It wasn't direct calls. It was the low, buzzing vibration of notifications that I wasn't tagged in but was definitely the subject of. I made the mistake of opening social media while my coffee was brewing. There, at the top of the feed, was a post from Brandon. It was a photo taken inside the Harbor Light workshop. The lighting was warm, filtered to look nostalgic. It showed Brandon kneeling next to Poppy. She was holding a small wooden mallet, looking adorable and confused. Brandon was looking at her with a staged expression of fatherly devotion. The caption read, "Teaching the next generation the value of hard work and honest heritage. Sad that some people only see dollar signs when they look at this place. We build with wood, not greed. Family First Legacy. Whitaker Strong." It was a masterclass in manipulation. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. The comments section was a firing squad. So true. "Brandon, it is a shame when people forget where they came from. Praying for your mom. I heard she is going through a lot with ungrateful relatives. Hold the line. Denise. We support you. These weren't strangers. These were people I went to high school with. These were my mother's bridge club friends. These were people who had known me since I was 5 years old. Now deciding I was a villain because Brandon posted a picture with a hashtag. I felt a physical weight press down on my chest. It was the feeling of being erased. Denise didn't just want to win the lawsuit. She wanted to isolate me until I felt like I didn't exist in this town. She wanted to make me a ghost before I even stepped foot in court. I turned off my phone. I had to get Mia to school. The drive to the elementary school was usually my favorite part of the day. We would listen to the radio and sing along. Today, the car was quiet. Mia was sensing my stress like a barometer sensing a storm. "Mommy, are you okay?" she asked from the back seat. "I'm fine, baby," I lied. "Just a headache." When we pulled up to the drop-off circle, the air felt different. Usually, I would wave to the other moms. We would exchange brief, tired smiles about the weather or the homework load. Today, as I helped Mia out of the car, I saw Mrs. Gable. She was the head of the PTA. We had volunteered together at the bake sale 2 months ago. "Good morning, Janet," I said, forcing a smile. Mrs. Gable looked at me, then she looked at Mia. Then she looked down at her boots, adjusted her scarf, and turned her back to me to talk to another parent. It was a small gesture, a nothing gesture, but in a town like Sutton Harbor, it was a scream. I walked Mia to the door. Feeling the eyes on my back, I could hear the whispers. They weren't loud enough to catch the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the tone of judgment. That's her. That's the one suing her own mother. That's the one who wants the money. As I walked back to my car, a woman named Linda, who worked at the local bakery, intercepted me. "Riley," she said. Her voice was dripping with that fake, concerned syrup that is more poisonous than vinegar. "I just wanted to say, I hope you guys work it out. You know, lawsuits are so public. It must be hard on Mia." She didn't care about Mia. She was digging for information to take back to the group chat. "Mia is fine, Linda," I said, opening my car door. "And the truth usually is public." "Well," Linda sniffed. "Your mother is devastated. She was crying at the salon yesterday. Just thought you should know." I got in the car and slammed the door. My hands were shaking. Denise crying at the salon. It was a performance. She was rallying the troops. She was turning the entire community into a jury pool. When I got home, there was an email waiting for me. It was from Denise. Subject: "For the sake of the child. Riley, I am writing this against my lawyer's advice because I am a mother first. The lawsuit has been filed, but it hasn't been processed by the clerk yet. You have until 5 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. If you sign the agreement, I will drop the damages claim. I will even increase the gift for Mia to $25,000. This is not an admission of guilt on my part. It is an act of mercy. Do not let your pride destroy your financial future. You cannot win this. You will be bankrupt within 6 months just paying for the filings. Think about Mia. Do you want her to grow up with a mother who is destitute? Sign the attachment. End this." I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked. Destitute. She knew exactly where to hit. She knew I lived paycheck to paycheck. She knew that even if I was right, I couldn't afford to be right for very long. For a moment, just a terrifying, dark moment, I considered it. $25,000. I could move away. I could take Mia and go to Chicago or Minneapolis. I could start over where no one knew the name Whitaker. I could escape the glares at the school drop-off. I could stop the shaking in my hands. I put my head in my hands. The pressure was suffocating. It felt like the walls of the duplex were closing in on me. Maybe I was the villain. Maybe I was greedy. Maybe I should just take the scraps from the table and be grateful. That evening, dinner was quiet. I made spaghetti, Mia's favorite, but neither of us was eating much. Mia put her fork down. She looked at me with those serious, brown eyes that saw too much. "Mom," she said. "Yeah, sweetie. Today at recess, Poppy didn't play with me." My heart broke a little more. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry." She said her dad told her I'm not really her cousin, Mia said. Her voice was flat, matter of fact, which made it hurt worse. She said real cousins have the same blood. I gripped the edge of the table. "Poppy is 6. Mia, she doesn't know what she's saying. She's just repeating things." "I know," Mia said. She looked down at her plate, pushing a meatball around. Then she looked up again. "But Mom, do you think I'm yours?" The world stopped. The lawsuit, the money, the town, the shame, it all vanished. All that was left was that question. "What?" I whispered. "Do you believe I'm your real kid?" she asked. "Or am I just an addition, like Grandma said?" I stood up. I walked around the table and pulled her into a hug so tight I was afraid I might squeeze the breath out of her. "You listen to me," I said, my voice fierce and shaking. "You are my daughter. You are the most real thing in my life. I chose you. Do you understand? Biology is just an accident. Choosing someone that is a promise. I promise to be your mom, and I never break a promise." Mia hugged me back. "Okay," she whispered into my shirt. "I believe you." I pulled back and looked at her. "I am going to fight for you. Mia, I don't care what Grandma says. I don't care what the town says. You have a seat at that table, and I am going to make sure nobody ever pulls it out from under you again." That was the moment the doubt died. Denise could keep her $25,000. She could keep her fake tears at the salon. I wasn't fighting for money anymore. I was fighting for Mia's right to exist in this family. The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick. I drove 2 towns over, to a sleek office building in Grand Rapids, far away from the prying eyes of Sutton Harbor. I had an appointment with Avery Sutton. Avery Sutton was a legend in the state legal circles. She wasn't a strip mall lawyer who handled DUIs and divorces. She was a corporate shark who specialized in trust disputes and family business wars. She cost $400 an hour, and I had drained my savings account to pay for the consultation. Avery was younger than I expected, maybe 40. She wore a sharp navy suit and had eyes that looked like they could cut glass. She listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting once. She looked at the screenshots I had printed. She looked at the trust agreement. She looked at the lawsuit Denise had served me. Finally, she leaned back in her chair and took off her glasses. "Okay," Avery said. "Here is the good news. You are right. The springing trustee clause is valid. The evidence of commingling funds with the Klein entity is strong. If we get this in front of a judge, we win." I let out a breath. "Okay, so we go to court." "Here is the bad news," Avery continued, her voice level. "Denise knows she will lose in court. That is why she sued you first." "I don't understand," I said. "This lawsuit," Avery tapped the stack of papers Denise had given me, "is garbage, defamation, tortious interference. It's weak, but it serves a purpose. It's called a SLAP suit, strategic lawsuit against public participation, or in this case, a strategic lawsuit to bleed you dry." Avery leaned forward. "She isn't trying to win a verdict, Riley. She is trying to drown you in paper. She is going to file motions, request extensions, demand depositions. She is going to make this process take 2 years and cost you $50,000 in legal fees. She is betting that you will run out of money and energy before you ever get to a judge." "She wants me to quit," I said. "She wants you to break," Avery corrected. "She wants you to be so terrified of bankruptcy that you sign that settlement. It's a game of chicken. She is driving a tank, and you are on a bicycle." "So what do I do?" I asked. "I don't have a tank." Avery smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. "No, but you have the map. You know where the bodies are buried. We don't play defense, Riley. We play offense. We file a countersuit immediately. We petition for an emergency injunction to freeze the trust assets. We make it dangerous for her to continue. Can we do that?" "I can do that," Avery said. "But I need more. The spreadsheets you found are great, but they are just numbers. To get an emergency injunction, to really scare her, we need a witness. We need someone who can say, 'Yes, Denise told me to hide the money.'" "I don't have a witness," I said. "It's just Denise and Brandon." "Dig deeper," Avery said. "Someone prepared those tax returns. Someone wrote those checks. People in these small family companies always think they are loyal, until they realize they might be liable." I left Avery's office feeling a mix of terror and adrenaline. I had hired her. The retainer check had cleared out my emergency fund. I was all in. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the contact list on my phone. Who else knew the old bookkeeper, Mrs. Higgins, had died 3 years ago. Denise had replaced her with an outside firm, or so she said. My phone buzzed. It was 10:30 at night. A text message from an unknown number. Area code 231, local. "I heard you are asking questions about the Klein accounts." I stared at the screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. I typed back, "Who is this 3 dots appeared? Disappeared. Appeared again. I used to do the books for Harbor Light. Before your mother let me go because I asked too many questions about the kitchen renovation, I held my breath. This was it. This was the person Avery was talking about. "Can we talk?" I typed. "Not on the phone." The reply came instantly. "She checks the logs. Meet me tomorrow. 7 a.m. The diner on Route 6. The back booth." "Okay," I typed. "I'll be there." The The final message chilled me to the bone. Come alone. And don't tell anyone, especially not your family. You have no idea how deep this goes. It's not just the money. The Route 6 diner was the kind of place that smelled of bacon grease and stale cigarette smoke. Even though smoking had been banned inside for 20 years, it was the last place anyone from the Whitaker social circle would ever set foot, which made it the perfect place for a treasonous meeting. I sat in the back booth, nursing a black coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. My eyes were fixed on the door. At 7 o'clock on the dot, a woman walked in. I recognized Tessa Monroe immediately, though she looked different than I remembered. When she worked at Harbor Light as the internal bookkeeper, she always wore crisp blazers and had her hair pulled back in a severe bun. Now, she was wearing a thick parka and a beanie, looking less like a corporate accountant and more like someone who was trying to disappear. She spotted me, hesitated, and then slid into the booth opposite me. She didn't take off her coat. "Did anyone follow you?" she asked. Her voice was tight, anxious. "No," I said. "I took the long way. Tessa, thank you for coming." She looked down at her hands. They were clasping a thick manila envelope so hard her knuckles were white. "I didn't do it for you," she said bluntly. "I did it because she ruined my reputation. When she fired me, she told the staffing agencies I was incompetent. She told them I made errors. I haven't been able to get a decent job in 3 years because of her." "She told the family you resigned for health reasons," I said, feeling a spike of anger on her behalf. Tessa scoffed. "She lies, Riley. That is what she does. She breathes lies." She pushed the envelope across the table. It felt heavy. "What is this?" I asked. "Insurance," Tessa said. "I made copies before she locked me out of the server. I printed the things that didn't make sense. I knew one day she would try to pin something on me, and I wanted to be ready." I opened the clasp. Inside was a stack of emails, invoices, and purchase orders. "Look at the third page," Tessa instructed, pulling a menu over to shield her face as a waitress walked by. I flipped to the third page. It was an email from Denise to Tessa, dated 4 years ago. Subject: vendor payment structuring. Tessa, regarding the payment to Klein Ridge for the consultation work. Do not send the full $40,000 at once. Break it down. 4 payments of $9,900 over 4 weeks. We do not need the bank flagging this for review. Keep it under the reporting threshold." My breath hitched. In the world of finance, that had a name. It was called structuring. It was a federal crime designed to bypass anti-money laundering laws. "She put it in writing," I whispered. "She's arrogant," Tessa said. "She thinks because she owns the company, she owns the laws. But look at the vendors. Riley, that's the real trick." Tessa pointed to a spreadsheet in the stack. It was a list of suppliers. "See this one, Northwood Logistics, and this one, Superior Shelving Solutions." "I recognize them," I said. "We use them for shipping and storage." "No," Tessa shook her head. "You use Northwood Trucking. Northwood Logistics is a shell company registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. Denise set it up. She pays the real trucking company the market rate, say $2,000 for a shipment, but she bills the trust $5,000 payable to Northwood Logistics. She pays the real bill, and she pockets the $3,000 difference." "She's skimming," I said. "She's marking up her own company's expenses and paying herself the profit." "It's not just skimming," Tessa said grimly. "It's bleeding. She's been doing this for 6 years. I tried to warn her that the margins were getting too thin, that the company couldn't support the drain. She told me to get creative with the inventory valuation. When I refused, she fired me." I looked at the papers. This was the map. My grandfather's files had shown the money leaving, but Tessa's files showed exactly how the machine worked. "Why, I asked. "The company makes good money. Why steal from herself?" "Because the company money belongs to the company," Tessa said. "And the trust money has rules. But Denise, she has expensive tastes. And Brandon has gambling debts." I looked up sharply. "Gambling debts. Online poker," Tessa said. "Tens of thousands. Guess who pays off the credit cards? The company. Under employee retention bonuses. I felt sick. I thought of Brandon's smirk. I thought of his family first post. He wasn't protecting the legacy. He was protecting his bankroll. Take it, Tessa said, standing up. Burn her down, Riley, but leave my name out of it until you have a subpoena. She walked out into the cold morning air before I could even say thank you. I didn't go home. I went straight to Avery Sutton's office. When I laid the documents on Avery's desk, her eyebrows shot up. She didn't say a word for 5 minutes. She just read, flipped pages, and highlighted lines with a yellow marker. Finally, she picked up her phone. Get me Malcolm Greer, she said to her assistant, and get Marcus Thorne on the line. We need a forensic audit started yesterday. She looked at me. You just handed me a smoking gun, Riley. This email about structuring payments, this is jail time. This is federal. By the afternoon, the machinery of justice had begun to turn, and it was loud. Malcolm Greer, my grandfather's attorney, had been contacted. He was furious. Apparently, Denise had been sending him falsified quarterly reports for years, painting a picture of a healthy, compliant trust. When Avery sent him the scans of the structuring email and the fake vendor list, he didn't just agree to help, he declared war. He immediately filed an emergency petition with the probate court to freeze the trust's assets pending a full audit. At 3 o'clock, I was sitting in Avery's conference room with Marcus Thorne, the forensic accountant. He was a quiet man with glasses who looked like he enjoyed spreadsheets more than people. He had my laptop, the USB drive, and Tessa's documents spread out on a massive table. It's a classic bleed-out, Marcus murmured, tapping on his keyboard. She's using the vendor in the middle fraud scheme. It's not sophisticated, but it's effective if no one checks the addresses. We checked, I said. We did, Marcus agreed. I just ran a background check on Klein Ridge Consulting. It has no employees, no office. Just a registered agent, and the bank account associated with it. It has direct transfers to a personal account held by Denise Whitaker. Can we prove it's her account? Avery asked. The bank will confirm it once we have the court order, Marcus said. But the routing numbers match a mortgage payment she made 2 years ago. Just then, Avery's assistant knocked on the door. She looked pale. Ms. Sutton, you have a call from the bank representative at First National, and there is a frantic voicemail from the lumber supplier for Harbor Light. Avery smiled cold and sharp. It's starting, because we had filed the emergency petition. The banks were notified. The credit lines were being paused. The business-as-usual flow of money that Denise relied on to juggle her lies had just been cut off. When the money stops moving, the panic starts. I checked my phone. I went to Brandon's social media page. The family first photo was gone. In fact, his entire account was set to private. He's running for cover, I said, showing Avery the screen. He knows the credit cards are about to stop working, Avery said, but if I thought Denise would go down quietly, I was dead wrong. She didn't attack the evidence. She didn't try to explain the fake vendors. She came for the only thing that mattered to me. At 4:30, my phone pinged with an email. It wasn't from Denise. It was from a family law firm I didn't recognize. Subject emergency motion for custody modification. Mia Hughes. I froze. My fingers trembled as I opened the attachment. It was a legal filing. Denise was petitioning the family court to review my adoption of Mia. The language was vile. Petitioner Denise Whitaker alleges that the respondent, Riley Hughes, is suffering from acute paranoia and mental instability, evidenced by her recent harassment of family members and delusional accusations of theft. Petitioner asserts that the minor child, Mia Hughes, is being subjected to emotional distress and an unsafe environment due to the respondent's erratic behavior. Petitioner requests an immediate psychiatric evaluation of the respondent and temporary guardianship of the minor child to be granted to the petitioner. She was trying to take Mia. She was calling me crazy. She was using my investigation, the very truth I had uncovered, as proof that I was paranoid. She's evil, I whispered. The room spun. Avery, she's trying to take my daughter. Avery snatched the phone from my hand. She read the email in 10 seconds. Her face went hard as stone. "This is a desperation move," Avery said firmly. "She knows she's caught on the money, so she's trying to break you emotionally. She thinks if she threatens the girl, you'll drop the lawsuit to save custody." "Will it work?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Can she take her—" "Not on my watch," Avery said. "She just made a tactical error." She put herself in the position of claiming to be the safe guardian. Avery turned to me. "Do you have the video?" "What video?" "The video from the party, the chair, the fall." "I don't have it," I said. "Kara does, Brandon's wife." "Get it," Avery commanded. "If we show a judge that the woman claiming to be a safe guardian is the same woman who physically assaulted the child 3 days ago, this motion won't just be denied, it will be the nail in her coffin." I called Kara. I didn't know if she would answer. She was Brandon's wife. She was on the payroll, but she answered on the second ring. "Riley." Her voice was a whisper. "Kara, I need the video," I said. "She's trying to take Mia. She filed for custody." There was a silence on the other end. Then, a heavy sigh. "I saw the filing," Kara whispered. "Brandon told me. Riley, they are scared. They are really scared. I don't care if they are scared. I need to protect my daughter. Please, Kara, you saw what she did." "I sent it to your secure email," Kara said. 10 minutes ago. I can't do anything else. Riley, I have to live here." "That's enough," I said. "Thank you." We had the video. Avery filed a counter-motion immediately. We attached the video file. We attached the affidavit from the emergency room doctor who treated Mia's elbow. I had taken her the next day, just to have a paper trail. On Avery's advice, we requested a temporary restraining order against Denise Whitaker on behalf of Mia Hughes. By 5 o'clock, the judge had signed it. Denise wasn't getting custody. Denise wasn't even allowed within 500 feet of Mia. I sat back in the chair, exhausted. I felt like I had run a marathon. "We safe?" I asked Marcus. "Custody-wise." "Yes," Marcus said. He was still looking at his screen, his expression grim. "But Riley, you need to see this." "What now?" "I've been tracing the Education Reserve Fund," Marcus said. "This is the sub-account in the trust that is strictly locked for tuition. It's supposed to have $200,000 in it. And it's empty," Marcus said. I stared at him. "Empty." "Drained," Marcus corrected. 6 months ago, one lump sum transfer." "To where?" I asked. "Did she pay off Brandon's debts?" "No," Marcus turned the screen toward me. "She wired $180,000 to Riverview Luxury Estates." I blinked. "The retirement community." "Not just a community," Avery said, looking over his shoulder. "That's the deposit on one of their platinum villas, the ones with the lake view." The room went silent. Denise hadn't just stolen profit. She hadn't just covered gambling debts. She had liquidated the grandchildren's college fund Poppy's money, Mia's money to buy herself a luxury retirement home. She was planning to bail. She was planning to cash out, leave the empty husk of the company to Brandon, and retire in style while the rest of us fought over the scraps. "She was never protecting the legacy," I said, my voice cold. "She was cashing it out." Avery picked up her phone. "We're not waiting for the audit to finish," she said. "I'm calling the district attorney. This isn't civil anymore. This is grand larceny." The tunnel was open, the light was pouring in, and it was shining directly on my mother, holding a bag of stolen money, with nowhere left to run. The truth did not explode like a bomb. It did not happen with a bang and a cloud of smoke. Instead, the truth worked like a python. It wrapped itself around the Whitaker legacy and began to squeeze. By the third morning after I met with Tessa, the pressure was no longer theoretical. It was administrative. First National Bank was the first domino to fall. Because of the emergency petition Malcolm Greer had filed with the probate court, the bank's risk assessment department flagged the Harbor Light business accounts. They didn't freeze everything completely, not yet, but they placed a manual review hold on all transactions over $500. For a business that ran on cash flow, This was a cardiac arrest. I heard about it because Tessa still had friends in the accounts payable department. She texted me at 10 in the morning. Suppliers are calling. Checks are bouncing. The lumber yard just put a hold on the delivery for next week. They want cash on delivery or no wood. I sat in Avery Sutton's conference room, watching the fallout on my laptop screen. We had legal standing now, because I was the presumptive springing trustee. Avery had successfully argued that I had a right to monitor the financial health of the assets I was supposed to protect. She is bleeding, Avery said, staring at the latest report from the bank. She tried to move $50,000 to the Klein Ridge account this morning. The bank blocked it. She's desperate, I said. She knows the audit is coming. She is dangerous, Avery corrected. A trapped animal doesn't surrender. It bites. At 2 in the afternoon, the bite came. Denise's lawyer, a man named Sterling, who wore suits that were too shiny and smiled too much, requested an emergency mediation session. He claimed they wanted to resolve the misunderstanding before the court date. Avery advised against it. But I wanted to look her in the eye. I wanted to see if the cracks were showing. We met in a neutral conference room downtown. Denise was there. She wasn't wearing her usual armor of perfect makeup and condescension. She looked tired. The skin around her eyes was tight, and her hands, usually steady as rocks, were clasping and unclasping on the mahogany table. Brandon was there too. He looked worse. He was pale, sweating slightly, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. He kept checking his phone under the table. "Riley," Denise started, her voice sounding like dry leaves. "This has gone too far. The bank holds are strangling the shop. People's paychecks are at risk. Is that what you want? To starve the workers? You starve them when you skim the profits," I said, keeping my voice flat. "Don't put their hunger on my conscience. You ate their lunch years ago." Sterling cleared his throat. "We are prepared to offer a settlement, a generous one. Denise will agree to step down as the sole trustee. We will appoint a co-trustee board, you, Brandon, and a third independent party." I blinked. It was a massive concession. It was almost a surrender. "And the money?" Avery asked. "The missing funds, the education reserve." "We will work out a repayment plan," Sterling said quickly. "Over 10 years, with interest." It sounded good. It sounded reasonable. It was the kind of deal a tired person would take. "What is the catch?" I asked. Denise sat up straighter. The steel came back into her blue eyes. "One condition," she said, "to protect the sanctity of the family line." She slid a single piece of paper across the table. "You will sign this addendum to the trust," she said. "It clarifies the definition of beneficiary. It states that for the purpose of the Whitaker estate, inheritance is restricted to biological issue only. Mia keeps the $25,000 gift we discussed, but she is permanently removed from the trust lineage." I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking, even while her house was burning down, even while the bank was closing in. She was still obsessed with the purity of her bloodline. She was willing to give up control of her company, willing to pay back millions, just to ensure my daughter was legally declared less than. "You want me to sell my daughter's dignity for a seat on the board?" I asked. "I want you to respect the nature of this family." Denise hissed. "It is a blood trust, Riley. It always was. Your father understood that. That is why he left." The mention of my father, a man I hadn't seen in 30 years, stung, but it also clarified things. "No," I said. "Riley, be reasonable." Brandon spoke up, his voice cracking. "It's just paper. Mia doesn't need the shares. She needs a mom who isn't bankrupt. She needs a family that doesn't treat her like a contagion." I said. I looked at Denise. "You think this is about money. You think I am doing this for a payday. I am doing this because you looked an 8-year-old girl in the face and told her she wasn't real. Blood is not a license to humiliate my child, mother, and it is certainly not a license to steal." I stood up. "No settlement, no addendum. We go to court, and when I take the trust, I'm not going to exclude Poppy. I'm going to make sure both girls are taken care of. because unlike you, I know what a grandmother is supposed to be. Denise's face turned a violent shade of red. If you walk out that door, she threatened, you are dead to this company. I will strip you of everything. I will have the board vote you out of existence. You don't have a board anymore. Denise, I said. You just have accomplices. I walked out. 2 hours later, she tried to make good on her threat. My phone pinged with a notification. It was a mass email sent to the entire company directory, every employee, every manager, every floor worker. Subject: termination of association. Effective immediately. Riley Hughes is banned from all Harbor Light crafted company properties. Due to her ongoing malicious litigation against the family and the business, the board of directors has voted to sever all ties. Any employee found sharing proprietary information with Ms. Hughes will be subject to immediate dismissal. It was a public shaming. It was meant to isolate me, to make the workers see me as the enemy who was threatening their jobs. But Denise had miscalculated the mood on the floor. That evening, I got a call from Tessa. She shouldn't have sent that email, Tessa said, sounding almost gleeful. Why, it makes me look like a pariah. No, Tessa said, it makes you look like a threat, and the guys on the floor. They know something is wrong. They haven't had a raise in 4 years. They see Denise driving a new Mercedes while their overtime gets cut. That email confirmed their suspicions. They are saying, if the boss is that scared of Riley, then Riley must know where the bodies are buried. We have more help, Tessa added. I made some calls. I found the owner of the plumbing company Denise used for the fake renovations, and I found the guy who supplied the premium leather that turned out to be vinyl. Will they talk? They are fighting over who gets to talk first, Tessa said. Denise owes them money too. She stiffed the plumber on the last $10,000. He kept the invoices. He kept the voicemails where she told him to bill it to factory maintenance. The wall of silence was crumbling. Meanwhile, Avery Sutton was tightening the noose in court. She filed a new motion petition for removal of trustee for cause. In the filing, she didn't just allege mismanagement. She used the evidence Marcus Thorne had uncovered. She listed the education reserve theft. She listed the springing trustee clause. The plaintiff asserts that the triggering event for Clause 7B has occurred. The actions of Denise Whitaker constitute gross malfeasance. Therefore, the position of trustee has automatically sprung to Riley Hughes. We are asking the court to formalize this transition and grant Ms. Hughes immediate access to secure the remaining assets. It was a bold move. We weren't asking for a trial to prove she was bad. We were arguing that under the rules of the trust, she was already fired, and the court just needed to give me the keys. The pressure was working on everyone, especially Brandon. Later that night, around 9 in the evening, my doorbell didn't ring. My phone did. It was a text from a number I didn't have saved, but I recognized the area code. Can we talk? Please don't tell Brandon. I hesitated. Who is this Kara? Kara Klein, Brandon's wife, the woman who had sent me the video of the chair incident. She was the quiet one, the one who always smiled and nodded at family dinners, terrified of making waves. I'm listening. I typed back. Brandon is falling apart. Kara wrote, he is pacing the kitchen. He keeps saying he signed things he didn't read. My stomach tightened. What things? Loan guarantees? Kara replied, Denise made him sign personal guarantees for a business loan last year. $200,000. She told him it was for a new wing of the factory. The expansion project. There is no expansion project. I typed. We checked the permits. No construction was ever started. I know. Kara wrote, that's why he's panicking. The bank called our house today. They said since the business accounts are flagged, they are looking at the guarantors. They are going to come for our house. Riley, we have a mortgage. We have Poppy. I stared at the screen. Denise had used her own son as a shield. She had taken out a loan, stolen the money, and left Brandon to hold the bag if things went wrong. He needs to talk to the lawyers. I typed, if he testifies, maybe we can protect him. Maybe we can show he was manipulated. He won't, Kara replied. He can't. Why? Because she has something on him. I frowned. What could she possibly have that is worse than losing his house? She has proof of what happened 3 years ago. Kara wrote, the accident. I racked my brain. 3 years ago, Brandon had been fine. He was working at the shop. He was married. What accident? I asked. A photo appeared on my screen. It was a screenshot of a text message from Denise to Brandon, dated yesterday. Text from Denise. You will stand by me in this deposition. Brandon, you will tell them Riley is lying, or I will release the police report from that night in November. I paid the officer to make the DUI go away. I paid the family of the girl you hit to stay quiet. I have the receipts. Brandon, if I go down, you go to prison. I gasped aloud in the quiet living room. Brandon had hit someone, a girl, and Denise had covered it up. It wasn't just financial fraud anymore. This was obstruction of justice. This was bribery. This was criminal on a level I hadn't even imagined. Denise wasn't just a controlling mother. She was a mob boss in a silk blouse. She held everyone hostage with their own sins. She paid for their mistakes with trust money, and then she kept the receipts to enslave them. Kara, I typed, my fingers shaking. This is blackmail. He is terrified. Kara wrote back. He thinks she will destroy his life if he speaks. She is already destroying it. I replied. She stole Poppy's college fund. She put your house up as collateral for her retirement villa. She doesn't care about him. Kara, she owns him. There was a long pause. The 3 dots bubbled for what felt like an eternity. I can't let her take our home. Kara finally wrote, and I can't let Poppy grow up thinking this is what family means. What do you want to do? I asked. I'm going to find the receipts. Kara wrote, she keeps a separate file for family insurance. It's in the safe at the house, not the bank. The house safe. Kara, that's dangerous. I know the combination. Kara wrote, she uses Poppy's birthday. I stared at the phone. The leverage was shifting. The cracks in Denise's fortress were turning into canyons. She had pushed everyone too far. She had assumed that fear would always be stronger than love or survival instinct. But she was wrong. Be careful. I typed, I'll send you what I find. Kara replied, but Riley, when you take her down, promise me you won't let Poppy pay for Brandon's mistakes. I promise. I typed, Poppy is family, real family. I set the phone down. The house was silent. But my mind was screaming. The forensic accountant had found the money trail. But Kara was about to find the bodies. The next 24 hours were going to end this. One way or another, the meeting with Kara did not happen in a safe house or a lawyer's office. It happened in the back seat of her SUV, parked in the furthest corner of the Target parking lot on the edge of town. It was 10 degrees outside, and the windows were fogged up from the heat of the engine and our collective anxiety. I slid into the passenger seat. Kara looked terrible. She was wearing sunglasses even though it was overcast, likely hiding eyes swollen from crying. She didn't say hello. She just handed me a black flash drive and a thick envelope. She checks the mileage on the car, Kara whispered, her voice trembling. I have to be quick. I told her I was picking up prescriptions. Is this it? I asked, gripping the envelope. That's the loan documents, Kara said. The ones Brandon signed. You'll see the date. It was 2 days after the incident with the girl on the road. Denise made him sign the guarantee for the business loan right after she paid the police officer. She literally traded his freedom for his signature. I felt a wave of nausea. So she owns him. She owns his fear, Kara corrected. She took a ragged breath. But the flash drive, that's the dining room camera. I looked at the small piece of plastic in my hand. You had a camera. We installed it last year to watch the babysitter, Kara explained. Denise forgets it's there. She thinks technology is for people who don't have power. I pulled the footage from New Year's Eve. I plugged the drive into my laptop, which I had brought with me. I needed to see it. I needed to know that my memory wasn't playing tricks on me. I opened the file labeled Dining Room MP4. The video was high definition. The audio was crisp. I watched the scene unfold in miniature on my screen. I saw myself standing behind Mia. I saw Denise approach. and then I saw it. It wasn't a slip. It wasn't a clumsy accident. Denise looked directly at Mia, said something low, and then she planted her feet. She grabbed the back of the chair with both hands, and she yanked. It was a calculated, violent motion, like someone ripping a weed out of the ground. Mia went down hard. The sound of her body hitting the floor was sickeningly loud in the quiet car. But what chilled me the most was what happened next. In the video, while I was on the floor with Mia, Denise looked directly at Brandon. She didn't look worried. She looked satisfied. She gave him a tiny nod, a command. "Stay seated." And he did. "She assaulted my child," I whispered. "This isn't just bad manners. This is battery." "Are you going to put it on the internet?" Kara asked, her voice fearful. "If you do, the town will explode. Brandon will lose his mind." I closed the laptop. The temptation was there. I could upload this to social media right now. I could tag the local news. I could watch Denise Whitaker's reputation incinerate in real time. The comments section would tear her apart. But that was Denise's game. That was how she played with rumors, with public shame, with noise. "No," I said. "I'm not putting it on Facebook. I'm giving it to the judge. The internet forgets in 24 hours. Kara, the court record is forever. This video guarantees she never gets near Mia again. It proves she's a danger to children." Kara nodded, tears slipping out from under her glasses. "There is one more thing. The reason she is so obsessed with the real granddaughter thing." I looked at her. "Because she's a bigot. Kara, we know that." "It's not just that," Kara said. She turned to me, and for the first time, she took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red and terrified. "It's Poppy." "What about Poppy?" "Denise doesn't think Poppy is Brandon's." The silence in the car was heavy. "What?" "When Brandon and I got back together, we had been on a break," Kara said, her voice barely audible. "I saw someone else briefly. Denise knows. She has always suspected that Poppy isn't a Whitaker. She has never done a DNA test, but she holds it over us. She tells Brandon that the only reason she treats Poppy like a princess is because she chooses to believe the lie." My jaw dropped. The hypocrisy was staggering. Denise spent her entire life preaching about the sanctity of blood, about the Whitaker line, about how Mia wasn't real because she was adopted, and yet she suspected her precious biological heir wasn't biological at all. "She uses it," Kara sobbed. "Whenever Brandon tries to stand up to her, she whispers it. Do you want me to order the test, Brandon? Do you want the whole town to know you're raising another man's bastard? Do you want me to cut her out of the will like I did Riley? So she protects Poppy to blackmail Brandon." I realized. She doesn't love Poppy. She loves the leverage. "She told Brandon that if he doesn't testify against you," Kara said, "she will demand a court-ordered paternity test as part of the trust audit. She will publicly humiliate Poppy to save herself." I felt a cold rage that was entirely different from what I had felt before. This woman wasn't just a thief. She was a monster who viewed children, whether adopted or biological, as nothing more than poker chips. "Listen to me," I said, grabbing Kara's hands. "She is not going to do that." "You can't stop her," Kara said. "She's cornered." "I can stop her," I said, "because I don't care about the DNA. Poppy is my niece. She is Mia's cousin. That makes her family. I am going to take the trust, Kara. And when I do, I'm not going to order a test. I'm going to secure Poppy's future so Denise can never hold $1 over her head again." Kara looked at me, stunned. "You would do that? Even after everything Brandon did?" "Brandon is weak," I said. "But Poppy is innocent, and I am done with Whitaker children paying for the sins of the adults." I left the car with the evidence that would end the war. I drove straight to Avery Sutton's office. When I showed her the video, she didn't smile. She just nodded grimly. "That's the kill shot for the custody motion," Avery said. "We submit this under seal to the judge. We ask for an immediate protective order. If she comes within a mile of Mia, she goes to jail." And the other thing, I asked. I told her about the paternity blackmail. Avery leaned back in her chair, tapping a pen against her lip. That is diabolical and useful. I don't want to use it, I said quickly. I'm not bringing up Poppy's parentage in court. I refuse to drag a 6-year-old through that. We don't have to prove the parentage, Avery said sharply. We prove the threat. Use the text messages Kara sent you. It proves Denise is using the trust assets and the threat of disinheritance to suborn perjury. She is blackmailing a witness. That is a felony. Riley, we don't need to know who Poppy's father is to prove Denise is a criminal. Good, I said. Do it. By noon the next day, the walls were closing in on Denise. The video had been submitted to the judge in chambers. The forensic audit had confirmed the payments to the fake vendors. The education reserve theft was documented. At 2 o'clock, Avery's phone rang. It was Sterling, Denise's lawyer. Avery put it on speaker. Ms. Sutton, Sterling sounded exhausted. The swagger was gone. My client is prepared to discuss a global resolution. We are listening, Avery said. Mrs. Whitaker is willing to step down as trustee, Sterling said. She will retire to Florida. She offers a settlement of $50,000 to Ms. Hughes for emotional distress. In exchange, all lawsuits are dropped. The audit is sealed, and both parties sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. No one speaks of the finances. No one speaks of the internal family dynamics. They wanted silence. They wanted to bury the blackmail, the theft, and the assault, and run away to the retirement villa bought with stolen money. I looked at Avery. She nodded. It was my call. I leaned toward the speakerphone. Mr. Sterling, I said. This is Riley. Ms. Hughes? His voice was tight. Here is my counteroffer, I said. Write this down. I took a breath. 1. Denise resigns immediately. No board seat, no honorary title. Gone. 2. Full repayment of the misappropriated funds. She sells the villa. She liquidates her personal assets. Every dollar she stole from the education reserve and the company comes back. If she is bankrupt at the end of it, that is her problem. 3. I continued, my voice shaking with adrenaline. A public apology to Mia, in writing, admitting that the bloodline rhetoric was a violation of the trust's spirit. And 4. She signs a permanent restraining order. She never sees Mia again. She never sees Poppy again unless Brandon allows it. There was a long silence on the other end. That is vindictive, Sterling said. My client will never agree to public humiliation, and she will never agree to be cut off from her grandchildren. She cut herself off when she threw one on the floor and threatened to bastardize the other. I said, Take the deal, Sterling, or we play the video in open court next week, and then I hand the blackmail text to the district attorney. I will convey the message, Sterling said coldly. The line went dead. I felt a surge of triumph. We had them. We had the high ground, the evidence, and the moral authority. I went home early that day. I wanted to cook a real dinner for Mia. I wanted to celebrate the beginning of the end. But when I pulled into the driveway, I saw a process server's car parked at the curb. My heart stopped. Had they countersued? Had they found something else? A man in a cheap suit stepped out as I got out of my car. Riley Hughes. Yes. Service for you? He handed me a thin envelope and drove away. I stood in the driveway, the cold wind biting at my face. I tore open the envelope. It wasn't a lawsuit for money. It wasn't a defamation claim. It was a petition filed in the probate court. Petition for declaratory judgment, reconflict of interest. I scanned the document, my hands starting to shake violently. Petitioner Denise Whitaker asserts that the presumptive trustee, Riley Hughes, possesses an inherent and disqualifying conflict of interest regarding the administration of the Whitaker Family Trust. Petitioner cites that the trust was established for the preservation of the Whitaker genetic lineage as the mother of an adopted child. Ms. Hughes has a financial incentive to dilute the shares of the natural-born heirs to favor her non-biological ward. Therefore, Petitioner requests that the court invalidate the adoption of Mia Hughes for the purposes of inheritance, or in the alternative, permanently disqualify Riley Hughes from serving as trustee due to her bias against the biological family. I stared at the paper. She was trying to annul Mia's rights. She was asking a judge to rule that my love for my adopted daughter made me unfit to handle money. She was arguing that being an adoptive mother was a bias against the real family. It was the nuclear option. She knew she couldn't win on the fraud, so she was trying to blow up the very foundation of my motherhood. She was telling the court, you can have the money, or you can have the girl. You can't have both. I looked up at the gray sky. You want to make this about the adoption, I whispered. I thought of the documents in my safe. I thought of the springing trustee clause. I thought of Kara's secret about Poppy. Denise had made a fatal mistake. She thought attacking the adoption would shame me. She thought I would back down to protect Mia's history. She didn't know that she had just given me the platform to expose the one thing she feared most, the fact that blood was the biggest lie she had ever told. I walked into the house and called Avery. She filed, I said. I see it, Avery said, her voice sounding like she was sharpening a knife. She's arguing inheritance conflict. Get ready for court, I said. She wants to talk about what makes a real child fine. Let's put the whole damn family tree on the witness stand, including the parts she tried to prune. The days leading up to the final hearing were not filled with screaming matches or dramatic phone calls. They were filled with the suffocating quiet of paper. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by the physical history of my daughter's life. To fight Denise's petition, this insane claim that my love for Mia was a conflict of interest, I had to prove that my motherhood was valid. I had to prove that Mia wasn't just an investment strategy, as Denise claimed, but a human being whose best interests were served by staying with me. I dug through boxes I hadn't opened in years. I found the home study report from 5 years ago. I found the letters of recommendation from my pastor, my boss at the time, and my neighbors. I found the final decree of adoption, stamped with the golden seal of the state of Michigan. Holding that document, I felt a surge of panic that was sharper than any blade. Denise wasn't just coming for the money anymore. She was trying to rewrite reality. She was telling a court that because I wasn't biologically related to Mia, I couldn't be trusted to manage the family money fairly. She was weaponizing my infertility and my choice to adopt against me. I called Avery in a panic at 2 a.m. She can't do this. Can she? I asked, my voice tight. Can a judge really say I'm unfit to be a trustee because I adopted? Avery's voice was calm. The anchor in the storm. It is a Hail Mary. Riley, it is a desperate, ugly throw. In the legal world, we call this a distraction. She knows the fraud evidence is bulletproof. She knows the springing trustee clause is ironclad. So she is trying to muddy the waters. She wants the judge to focus on family dynamics instead of the math. If she can make you look unstable or biased, she hopes the judge will appoint a neutral third party to run the trust, someone she thinks she can manipulate. But what if it works? It won't, Avery said firmly, because while she is throwing mud, we are building a fortress. I need you to get character letters, not from family, from professionals, teachers, doctors, the people who see Mia every day. We need to show that you are her stability, and Denise is the chaos. So I did. I went to Mia's school. I sat with her second-grade teacher, Mrs. Gable, the same woman who had snubbed me at drop-off just a week ago. But when I explained that Mia's grandmother was trying to use the custody arrangement to settle a financial score, Mrs. Gable's demeanor changed. She was an educator, not a politician. She wrote a letter detailing Mia's attendance, her happiness, and my constant involvement. I went to Mia's pediatrician. He wrote a letter confirming that I was the sole medical decision-maker and had never missed a checkup. I gathered a mountain of proof that I was a mother. Plain and simple. While I was defending my home, the offensive line was moving forward with terrifying speed. Marcus Thorne, the forensic accountant, finished his final report on Thursday afternoon. We met in Avery's conference room. The atmosphere was different this time. There was no speculation, There were only cold, hard facts. Marcus slid a bound document across the polished table. It was 3 inches thick. "It is worse than we thought," Marcus said, removing his glasses. "The vendor fraud was just the clumsy stuff. The real issue is the tax filings." "Explain," I said. "She has been depreciating assets that don't exist," Marcus said. "She claimed a tax deduction of $60,000 last year for specialized machinery that was never purchased. She claimed research and development credits for vacations to Aspen and Paris. She has been underreporting the company's income to the IRS by nearly 40% for 5 years. I felt a pit form in my stomach. "That is tax evasion. That is prison," Avery corrected. "And because Malcolm Greer is the attorney of record for the trust, and he now has knowledge of this felony, he has a legal obligation to report it. He can't sit on this. Riley, if he does, he loses his license." "He reported it?" I asked. "He sent the packet to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division this morning," Avery said. "The clock has officially run out on a settlement. Once the government is involved, Denise can't buy her way out." The reality of it hit me. My mother was going to go to jail. Not because I wanted her to, but because she had flown so close to the sun on wings made of stolen cash that she had incinerated herself. That evening, I got a text. "Meet me. The pier. Alone. Please." It was Denise. Avery told me not to go. She said it was dangerous, but I knew it was over. I knew this was the last gasp, and I needed to look her in the eye one last time before the gavel came down. The pier at Sutton Harbor was desolate in January. The wind whipped off the lake, cutting through my coat. Denise was standing by the railing, looking out at the black water. She looked smaller. The camel hair coat looked too big for her. The perfect hair was windblown. I walked up and stood 6 feet away. I kept my hands in my pockets, gripping my phone. "You reported me to the IRS," she said. She didn't turn around. Her voice was flat. "The numbers reported you," I said. "I just turned on the light." She turned then. Her face was pale, the lines around her mouth deep and bitter. "I built it for you," she said. "For all of you. Do you think it was easy running a manufacturing plant in a town that is dying? I did what I had to do to keep the lights on. I got creative so Brandon could have a salary, so you could have a safety net." "You bought a retirement villa," I said. "You stole the college funds. Don't pretend this was altruism. Mom, you were cashing out." "I earned it," she snapped, her eyes flashing with that familiar fire. "I gave 40 years of my life to that sawdust factory. I deserved a life." "Not with Mia's money," I said. Denise stepped closer. Her face softened, shifting into a mask of tragic sorrow. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times. "Riley," she said, her voice trembling, "look at what you are doing. You are sending your own mother to prison. For what? For paper. For a point of pride. For justice." I said. "You can stop it," she whispered. "Greer listens to you. Tell him it was a mistake. Tell him we found the receipts. We can fix the tax returns. We can pay the penalties." "It's too late," I said. "It is never too late for family," she pleaded. Then, the mask slipped. The softness vanished, replaced by the steel that had cut me for 30 years. "Make a choice, Riley," she hissed. "You drop this. You drop the lawsuit. You drop the claim on the trust, or I swear to God, I will spend every last dime I have left destroying that adoption. I will hire experts to prove you are psychologically unfit. I will drag Mia through depositions until she doesn't know who she is. You want to be a mother? Prove it. Sacrifice the money for the girl." "If you choose that girl," she spat, pointing a gloved finger at me, "you lose this family. You lose everything." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had raised me, the woman who had terrified me, the woman who had turned love into a transaction. I felt a strange sense of peace. "You don't get it," I said quietly. "You think that's a threat. But it's the easiest choice I've ever made." "You choose the stranger?" she asked, disgust dripping from her voice. I choose the daughter, I said. You chose the chair. Mom, you chose to pull the chair out from under a child because of your ego. You broke the compact. You don't get to dictate the terms of family anymore. I turned my back on her. If you walk away, she screamed over the wind. Don't you dare come to my funeral. I kept walking. I won't, I said to the wind. I'll be too busy running the company. The next morning, the final piece of the puzzle walked through the door of Avery Sutton's office. I was sitting with Avery, reviewing the witness list for the hearing. The receptionist buzzed in. Ms. Sutton Brandon Klein is here. He says it is an emergency. Avery and I exchanged a look. Send him in, Avery said. Brandon looked like a ghost. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. His eyes were red-rimmed and darting around the room as if he expected a sniper to be hiding in the potted plants. He wasn't wearing his usual expensive suit. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, looking like the scared little brother I remembered from childhood. He stood in the doorway, wringing his hands. She knows, Brandon said. His voice was a croak. She knows Kara talked to you. She knows about the safe. Sit down, Brandon, I said gently. He collapsed into the chair. She called me this morning. She said I have to go to the police station today. She wants me to file a report saying I authorized the fake vendors. She wants me to take the fall. She wants you to confess to her crimes, Avery asked, her pen hovering over her legal pad. She said if I don't, she releases the file, Brandon whispered. He looked at me, shame burning in his eyes. The accident, the girl, she said she'll give the photos to the press. She'll ruin me. Riley, I can't go to jail for that. It was an accident. And the loan? I asked. The guarantee? She said the bank is going to foreclose on my house next week, Brandon said, burying his face in his hands. She said if I take the fall for the fraud, she'll pay off the loan with her personal savings. She's holding my house hostage. She's holding my life hostage. He looked up, tears streaming down his face. I don't know what to do. I'm trapped. Avery stood up. She walked over to the large screen on the wall. You're not trapped, Brandon, Avery said. You're blinded. You think she has the power to save you, but she doesn't. Avery connected her laptop. Show him, Riley. I nodded. I pulled up the forensic report Marcus had generated. Look at this, Brandon, I said, pointing to the screen. This is her personal savings account, the one she promised to use to save your house. He squinted at the numbers. It has $4,000 in it, I said. Brandon blinked. What no? She has millions. She had millions, I corrected. She spent it. She spent it on the villa. She spent it on the lawyers to fight me. She spent it on the hush money for your accident. Brandon, she is broke. She can't pay off your house. She is lying to you to get you to jump on the grenade so she can run away. Brandon stared at the screen. The color drained from his face until he looked like wax. She lied, he whispered. She always lies. I said, but that's not the worst part. I hesitated. This was the moment that would break him, but also the moment that might save him. Avery, I said, play the video. Avery clicked the file. The video of the dining room played. Brandon watched. He watched Denise walk up to Mia. He watched her yank the chair. He watched Mia hit the floor. But then, he watched himself. He watched himself sit there, smirk, and do nothing. He flinched as if he had been slapped. Jesus, he whispered. I didn't realize it looked like that. It gets worse, I said. Kara told me about the other threat, the paternity test. Brandon's head snapped up. She told you? She told me Denise threatens to expose Poppy to keep you in line, I said. She threatens to humiliate your daughter just to control you. I leaned across the table. Brandon, look at me. She doesn't care about the Whitaker line. She doesn't care about Poppy. She's willing to brand Poppy as illegitimate just to win a lawsuit. Is that the grandmother you want for your child? Brandon looked at the screen, where the numbers showed his mother was broke. He looked at the video, where his mother was violent. He looked at me, his sister, who was offering him a lifeline. "If I testify," Brandon said, his voice shaking, "she releases the accident file. I go to jail." "Maybe," Avery said, "but if you testify, you get immunity for the fraud. We can work a deal with the district attorney. You were coerced. You were manipulated. You might get probation for the financial stuff." "And the accident?" Brandon asked. "We deal with that," Avery said. "But if you stick with her, you go down for the fraud, the tax evasion, and she will probably release the accident file anyway when she gets desperate. This is your only way out." Brandon sat in silence for a long minute. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the hard drive. "She wanted me to say it was my idea," he murmured. "She wanted me to say I stole the money." He looked up at me. "She hates us, doesn't she?" "She loves herself," I said. "There isn't room for anyone else." Brandon took a deep breath. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He looked at the photo of Poppy he had as his phone wallpaper. "Okay," he said. "I'll do it. I'll testify." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "But you have to promise me one thing, Riley. No matter what happens to me, no matter what the DNA says or doesn't say, Poppy is safe. She gets her share. She doesn't pay for this." "I already told Kara," I said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Poppy is family, real family. That doesn't change." Brandon nodded. He pulled his hand away and picked up Avery's pen. "Where do I sign?" Avery pushed a blank affidavit toward him. "Start writing," she said. "Start with my mother, Denise Whitaker, instructed me to." As Brandon began to write, the pen scratching loudly against the paper. I looked out the window. The snow was falling again. Covering the gray streets of Sutton Harbor in a clean white blanket, we had the evidence, we had the springing trustee clause, and now we had the star witness. Denise thought she was walking into a courtroom to debate the validity of adoption. She didn't know she was walking into an execution. And the executioner was the son she thought she owned. The game was over. Now, we just had to watch the pieces fall. The courtroom in the Sutton Harbor District Courthouse smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. It was a smell I would forever associate with the end of my mother's reign. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Avery Sutton. My hands were folded in my lap, resting on the thick binder of evidence we had spent the last week assembling. Across the aisle, Denise Whitaker sat with her lawyer, Sterling. She looked impeccable. She was wearing a navy blue suit, a string of pearls, and an expression of long-suffering dignity. To anyone walking in off the street, she looked like a saintly grandmother being persecuted by a greedy child. But the Honorable Judge Vance, a woman with gray hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human lie, did not seem impressed by the pearls. "We are here regarding the emergency petition to remove the trustee of the Whitaker Family Trust," Judge Vance said, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room, "and the cross-petition regarding the validity of the adoption status of the minor child. Mia Hughes, let's proceed." Sterling stood up first. He smoothed his tie. He started exactly where we expected him to, with the mud. "Your Honor," Sterling began, his voice smooth, "this case is not about money. It is about intent. Walter Whitaker founded this trust to protect his bloodline. The petitioner, Ms. Hughes, is attempting to dilute that legacy by forcing the inclusion of a non-biological child. My client, Mrs. Whitaker, has simply been trying to protect the family assets from external confusion." He was good. He made bigotry sound like financial prudence. Avery didn't even look up. She just waited for him to finish. When it was her turn, she stood up slowly. "Your Honor," Avery said, "Mr. Sterling is right about one thing. This is about intent, but not the intent to protect a bloodline. It is about the intent to defraud." Avery walked to the podium. "We would like to begin with Exhibit A. The respondent claims she acts only out of love and protection for the grandchildren. We believe the court needs to see what that protection looks like in practice." Avery nodded to the clerk. The lights in the courtroom dimmed slightly. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It was the video from New Year's Eve. I watched Denise stiffen in her seat. She hadn't seen this. She didn't know we had it. On the screen. The scene played out in high definition. The festive dining room, the family chatting, and then, the movement. Denise walking up to Mia. The exchange of words. And then, the yank. The sound of the chair scraping and Mia hitting the floor was shockingly loud in the silent courtroom. Thud. In the gallery. I heard a collective intake of breath. The 20 or so people watching, mostly curious locals, and a few factory workers, were stunned. Judge Vance watched the screen. She watched Denise stand over the fallen child. She watched Brandon smirk. She watched the other adults look away. The video ended. The lights came back up. "That," Avery said, pointing to the screen, "is how Denise Whitaker treats a beneficiary of the trust. It was not an accident. It was an assault. And it sets the stage for everything else we are about to show you." Denise was staring straight ahead, her face a mask of stone, but I saw a small tick jumping in her jaw. "Let's talk about the money," Avery continued. She called Marcus Thorne to the stand. Marcus was clinical. He didn't use emotional language. He just used math. "Mr. Thorne," Avery asked, "did you review the transaction history of the Whitaker Trust and Harborlight Crafted Company?" "I did," Marcus replied. "And what did you find regarding the vendor Klein Ridge Consulting?" "I found that over a period of 5 years, $480,000 was transferred to this entity," Marcus said. "I found that the entity has no office, no staff, and provided no services. I traced the funds from the Klein Ridge account directly into a personal account held by Denise Whitaker." Sterling jumped up. "Objection circumstantial." "Overruled," Judge Vance said, writing something down. "And what about the education reserve?" Avery asked. "The fund is insolvent," Marcus stated flatly. $180,000 was removed 6 months ago. It was used to pay a deposit to Riverview Luxury Estates for a private residence in Mrs. Whitaker's name. The judge looked over her glasses at Denise. "You spent the children's college fund on a condo." Denise leaned over and whispered frantically to Sterling. Sterling stood up. "Your Honor, my client maintains that these were loans, internal family loans that were intended to be repaid." "Without documentation?" Judge Vance asked. "Without interest. That's not a loan, counselor. That's a piggy bank." Avery then played her ace. She projected the trust agreement onto the screen. She highlighted Clause 7B in bright yellow. "The springing trustee clause," Avery read aloud. "In the event of malfeasance or commingling of assets, the trusteeship automatically passes to the primary adult beneficiary. Your Honor, the theft is the trigger. Denise Whitaker is not the trustee. She hasn't been the legal trustee since the first fake invoice was paid 5 years ago. Riley Hughes is the trustee." It was a checkmate move. We weren't asking the judge to fire Denise. We were asking the judge to recognize that Denise had already fired herself by breaking the rules. Denise's face was turning a blotchy red. She stood up, ignoring her lawyer. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "I built that company. I moved the money to save the business. My son Brandon knew about it. He handled the operations. If there are accounting errors, talk to him." She was doing it. She was throwing him to the wolves right in open court. Judge Vance banged her gavel. "Sit down, Mrs. Whitaker." Avery turned to the back of the room. "We call Brandon Klein to the stand." Denise froze. She turned around slowly. She looked at Brandon, who was sitting in the back row, his head down. She stared at him with a look that promised nuclear war. She clearly thought he wouldn't do it. She thought the threat of the accident file would keep him silent. Brandon stood up. He walked down the aisle. He looked terrified, shaking like a leaf. But he kept walking. He took the stand. He was sworn in. "Mr. Klein," Avery said gently, "did you authorize the payments to the fake vendors?" Brandon took a breath. He looked at his mother. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the judge. "No," he said. His voice was quiet. "I mean, I signed the checks, but I didn't create them. My mother did." "Why did you sign them?" Avery asked. Because she told me to, Brandon said. She told me that if I didn't, she would ruin me. Ruin you, how? She holds debts over me, Brandon said. Gambling debts, and other things, personal mistakes I made in the past. She keeps a file. She told me that if I ever went against her, she would release the file to the police and the press. She told me she would take my house. Liar, Denise screamed. She actually screamed it. He's lying. He's ungrateful trash. Mrs. Whitaker, one more outburst and I will hold you in contempt, Judge Vance barked. Avery walked over to the defense table and dropped a stack of paper in front of Sterling. Your Honor, we have submitted copies of text messages sent from the respondent to Mr. Klein just 2 days ago, Avery said. In these texts, she explicitly threatens to expose a past legal infraction involving a car accident if he does not perjure himself in this courtroom. She also threatens to publicize questions regarding the paternity of his daughter, Poppy, to humiliate him into silence. The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Vance picked up the copies of the texts. She read them. Her expression went from stern to disgusted. She looked at Denise. You threatened to bastardize your own granddaughter to win a lawsuit. Denise didn't answer. She slumped back in her chair, the fight suddenly draining out of her. She looked at Brandon, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at his hands, crying silently. Judge Vance set the papers down. She took off her glasses. I have heard enough, the judge said. This is not a complicated case of estate law. This is a looting. She turned to the court reporter. On the matter of the petition to remove, I find in favor of the plaintiff, the evidence of malfeasance is overwhelming. Denise Whitaker is hereby removed as trustee, effective immediately and retroactively. On the matter of the springing trustee, she continued, looking at me, I affirm the clause. Control of the Whitaker Family Trust and all voting shares of Harbor Light Crafted Company are transferred to Riley Hughes. Your Honor, Sterling tried to intervene. I am not finished. Judge Vance cut him off. Regarding the petition to invalidate the adoption of Mia Hughes, I find this motion to be frivolous, cruel, and without legal merit. The trust language clearly includes legally adopted descendants. Mia Hughes is a beneficiary. Period. Any further attempts to challenge her status will be met with sanctions. The judge turned her gaze on Denise. It was a look that could peel paint. Mrs. Whitaker, you are ordered to provide a full accounting of all funds misappropriated within 30 days. You will repay the trust in full, including the liquidation of your personal assets and real estate, and I am forwarding the transcript of this hearing, specifically the testimony regarding tax evasion and blackmail, to the district attorney's office. You are looking at serious criminal exposure. Finally, the judge said, I am granting the permanent restraining order. You are to have no contact with Mia Hughes or Riley Hughes. If you go near that child again, you will go straight to jail. She banged the gavel. Court is adjourned. The sound of the gavel was the best sound I had ever heard. It sounded like a chain breaking. Sterling started packing his briefcase frantically, not even looking at his client. Denise sat there, alone at the table. She looked small. The power was gone. The money was gone. Her family was gone. I stood up. I hugged Avery. I hugged Kara, who was weeping in the front row. I walked over to the witness stand and put a hand on Brandon's shoulder. You did it, I whispered. It's over. I'm sorry, Brandon sobbed. I'm so sorry. Riley, go home to your daughter, I said. We'll figure the rest out later. I walked toward the exit. I had to pass Denise's table. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, filled with a mix of hatred and shock. You destroyed this family, she whispered. I stopped. I looked down at her. No, I said calmly. I cleaned it. You were the rot. Mom, I just cut it out. I walked out of the courtroom and into the bright, cold Michigan afternoon. The air hit my lungs, and for the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel the weight of the Whitaker name. I just felt light. That night, the house was quiet. I made dinner macaroni and cheese, Mia's choice. We sat at the small round table in our kitchen. It wasn't the grand mahogany table at the estate. It didn't have lace tablecloths or expensive silver, but it was ours. Mia climbed onto her chair. She hesitated for a second, looking at me. The trauma of New Year's Eve was still there, a shadow in her eyes. "Mom," she asked. "Yeah, baby. Is this my chair?" I walked over to her. I didn't pull the chair out. I pushed it in, gently, until she was tucked safely against the table. "Yes," I said. "This is your chair, and it will always be your chair." I sat down next to her. "The judge said so," I added, smiling. "But more importantly, I say so. There is no real or fake in this house. Mia, there is just us. You are my daughter. You are a Whitaker, and nobody is ever going to move you again." Mia smiled, a real bright smile that reached her eyes. She picked up her fork. "Okay," she said. "Can I have extra cheese?" "You can have all the cheese you want." I said, outside, the snow continued to fall, burying the past. Inside, we were warm. The trust was safe. The factory would be saved. And the seat at the head of the table was finally waiting for someone who knew how to build a family. Not just a fortune. Thank you so much for listening to this story of justice and family redemption. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed seeing Riley take down the toxic empire and protect her daughter, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to see the truth win. See you in the next story.